Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's Room of Choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
This is Embrace Your Inner Boldness, a podcast about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. I'm Melissa Henning-Frank, coach, guide, and founder of Becoming Bold. I help you strip away the conditioning, reclaim your voice, and rise into the power that's always been yours. Let's get right to it. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm really glad you're here today because last week's episode clearly resonated. I got messages and I heard from people who listened and said things like, "This is exactly what's happening on my team, and I didn't have language for it until now." That tells me that this conversation isn't done. So if you didn't catch last week's episode called Built Like a Unit, go back and listen to that one first. It sets the foundation for everything that we're doing today. We talked about what military teams get right about cohesion and trust, and why so many corporate teams are missing it, mainly because of how those environments are designed. And today we're going deeper because you asked the right follow-up question, which is, okay, I get it, but what do I actually do? So today we're answering that. How do you build stronger bonds on your team? How do you create consistent accountability without it feeling like a punishment every time? How do you get to a place where feedback doesn't sting? It just gets perceived as information. And how do you develop the kind of respect and trust that doesn't evaporate the second things get difficult? We have a lot to get into, so let's go. Before we get into the how, I want to give you a few numbers that I think will make this feel a little more urgent because sometimes we know something matters, but we don't realize how much it matters until we see the data. So Gallup has been studying employee engagement for a long time, and here's what they've consistently found. Only about 23% of employees worldwide strongly agree that they trust the leadership of their organization. That's fewer than 1 in 4 people going to work every day and actually trusting the people in charge. Think about what that costs. Think about the decisions people aren't making because they don't feel safe, the ideas they're holding back, the concerns they're not raising, the energy they're spending managing perception instead of doing the work. Big, huge energy leak. And here's the one that really gets me. Google ran an internal research project called Project Aristotle, where they studied hundreds of their own teams to figure out what made the highest performing teams different. They expected it to be things like IQ or technical skill or the right mix of personalities, but what they found was something much more human. The single biggest predictor of team performance was psychological safety. And the degree to which team members felt safe to take risks, to speak up, to disagree, and be wrong without being punished for it. So not talent and not experience, but safety. And yet we still design our corporate environments in ways that kind of punish people for being honest. We reward looking good over being real. We give feedback in ways that feel like criticism rather than coaching. We hold people accountable inconsistently. So nobody actually knows where the line is. And then we wonder why the team doesn't feel like a team. The military doesn't wonder about this because they build the foundation first and the work comes after. And we're going to talk about how you start doing that too. So let's get into how we build bigger, stronger bonds. Okay, so step 1. You have to stop waiting for bonds to form naturally, and you have to start building them on purpose. This is the thing that separates military teams from most corporate teams. The military doesn't just say, "Hey, you guys are a team now, good luck." They create shared experiences that build connection. They create rituals and routines that reinforce identity. They create moments where people have to depend on each other, sometimes before they even feel ready. And you can do versions of all of that without a drill sergeant. So here's what this looks like. First, Create shared experiences outside of the task. I'm not talking about a forced happy hour or pizza party where everybody stares at their phones. I mean intentional moments where people get to know each other as humans, not just as job titles. So, team lunches where work is off the table, a standing check in at the start of each meeting that's just about how people are actually doing. Even a 5-minute virtual coffee once a week between team members who don't normally interact. The vehicle matters less than the intention. Number 2, develop shared language. Military teams have shared vocabulary, shared shorthand, shared references that only make sense inside the unit. And when you have that, it creates this felt sense of belonging. And you don't have to manufacture jargon, but you can build shared frameworks. So, what do you call a dropped ball on your team? What do you call a win? What is the phrase that you use when somebody needs to say it out loud instead of letting it fester? Teams with this shared language communicate faster and more honestly. Third, create shared routines and rituals around recognition and accountability, both of them. Recognition can't just be a Microsoft Teams or Slack emoji or a mention at the end of the meeting. Recognition that actually builds bonds is specific, public, and personal. It says, I see what you did and it mattered. And accountability, which we'll talk about more in a minute, has to be consistent enough to be trusted because inconsistent accountability breaks bonds faster than almost anything else. The through line in all of this is intentionality. Bonds don't just happen because you work in the same Teams meeting. You have to build them like you really mean it. So, how do you build consistent accountability? This is the one that leaders really struggle with the most. And I want to say something about it that might be uncomfortable. When accountability is inconsistent on a team, it's usually because the leader is conflict avoidant or because expectations weren't clear enough to enforce in the first place, or because accountability got tied to punishment in their mind instead of to growth. And so they let things slide, or they address it with one person but not the other, or they bring it up once and then they drop it. And the team notices. They always notice. And here's what consistent accountability actually requires. It starts with clarity. You cannot hold people accountable to something they don't clearly understand. So before you ever have an accountability conversation, you have to ask yourself, did I actually say it out loud and confirm that they heard it? Or did I assume that we were on the same page? And what are the expectations here specifically? Are those expectations equally clear to everyone on the team or just to some people? That question right there, are expectations clearly understood by everyone on this team, is one that I bring into every single team effectiveness conversation I facilitate because most of the time, the answer reveals a gap that nobody realized was even there. Accountability isn't punishment. That's the shift that changes so much. When accountability becomes a corrective conversation instead of a disciplinary one, people really stop dreading it. You're not going to them because they failed. You're going to them because you both agreed on something and something went sideways and you want to understand why. You can say, hey, we said this was going to be done by Thursday and it wasn't, so help me understand what happened. That's not a dig on anyone. That's a conversation between two adults who both care about the outcome. And finally, accountability has to be consistent across the team. If you hold one person to the standard and look the other way for somebody else, you've already told the whole team that the standard is negotiable. And you've broken trust. And the people doing the work resent that. And usually they keep quiet about it because nobody wants to be the one to say it out loud. Consistent accountability is one of the most profound acts of respect you could offer your team. It says that everyone here matters equally and we all have skin in the game. So, how do we get to a place where feedback doesn't sting? I love this question so much because Feedback that doesn't sting isn't some kind of weird magic. It's culture. It's what happens when feedback is so regular and so expected that it stops being an event. Here's the reality. Feedback feels like an attack when it's rare. When the only time someone pulls you aside is when something went wrong, you start to associate feedback with failure and you brace for it. You get defensive. Your nervous system treats it like a threat because in that environment, it kind of is. But when feedback is consistent, it's normalized, and it goes in every direction, not just top down, it stops being a thing. It just becomes how the team communicates. The military calls this after action reviews or AARs. After every significant event, you debrief. What went well? What didn't? What would we do differently next time? And everybody participates. The colonel and the private are both in the room saying what they saw and what they experienced. It's not about blame. It's about learning as a cohesive unit. You don't need to use military terminology, but you do need the practice. So start with low stakes, short, regular feedback loops. A quick end of week check. What worked? What didn't? What do we need to adjust? And make it a team practice, not just a one-on-one event. When the whole team is doing it together, it normalizes faster. And then work on the ratio. For every piece of corrective feedback that someone receives, they should be getting significantly more recognition for what they're doing right. And I don't mean to use this as some kind of manipulation tool, but because it builds the trust that makes the corrective feedback receivable. When somebody knows that you genuinely see their contributions, they're much more open to hearing where they can grow. And lead from the front on this one. If you're a leader and you never receive feedback from your team, you never model what it looks like to be told something hard and stay in it, your team will not trust that feedback is actually safe for them either. Say it out loud. I want to know where I could have done that better, and then actually mean it. That's where feedback stops stinging. When it becomes a two-way street that everybody travels regularly, instead of a one-way road that only leads to one person's office. How do you build high-level trust and respect? Let's talk about the role of self-awareness. We are really getting into the heart of it now. And here's what I know after years of facilitating team effectiveness work. The teams that build the deepest trusts are not necessarily the ones with the best processes or the best numbers, even though those things help. They're the teams where the people understand themselves well enough to not be a mystery to each other. Think about it. How hard is it to trust somebody whose reactions you can't predict? Who shuts down in conflict? Who seems fine but actually isn't? Or who blows up over something that seemed really small? When you don't understand why someone does what they do, your brain fills in the blanks, and it rarely fills them in with empathy. So self-awareness can help change that. When you know how you're wired, how you process information, how you respond to stress, how you handle conflict, what you need to do your best work, you can communicate that to your team. And when your team knows these things about themselves and each other, you stop working against each other's grain without realizing it. And this is where I bring in two tools in my team effectiveness workshops: the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI, and the Thomas-Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument, or TKI. MBTI gives you a framework for understanding how you're naturally energized, how you take in information, how you make decisions, and how you organize your world. And when you use it in a team context, when you can look at each other and say, oh, this is why we approach this differently, it replaces judgment with curiosity. It stops the story of that person is difficult, and it starts the story of that person processes the world differently than I do, and now I know how to bridge that. The TKI takes this into the conflict space. It shows you your default conflict style. Are you collaborative? Are you mainly competing, avoiding, accommodating, compromising? And it shows your team where they land too. And here's what that does for trust. It removes the personal emotion from conflict. When somebody understands why they avoid hard conversations or why they tend to push too hard, they can start to make different choices on purpose instead of just reacting. And when the team can see each other's conflict styles, they stop taking each other's behavior personally. Big, huge trust builder. These are not personality tests that put people in a box. I look at them like a mirror. They show you something true about yourself so you can work with it instead of against it. And the work I do in team effectiveness workshops is built around exactly this. We bring MBTI and TKI into the room. We facilitate reflection. We create space for the team to see each other more clearly. And then we build from there. How do we communicate better? How do we handle conflict in a way that actually resolves instead of just postponing it? How do we give each other feedback in a way that considers how each person is wired? Here's the steps in case you want to do this yourself. Step 1 starts with you. Get to know your own style. Get to know your conflict defaults. Understand your own communication patterns. You can't lead other people through self-awareness that you haven't done yourself. Step 2, create the space for the team to do it together. Bring a tool in or bring a facilitator in. Make it a dedicated conversation, not an agenda item that you're squeezing in between 2 other meetings. Step 3, do something with what you learn. Build agreements. Create team norms based on what you discovered. Say, now that we know this about ourselves, here's how we're going to handle whatever it is differently. If the learning doesn't change anything, it won't stick. Step 4, keep going back. Self-awareness is not a one-time event. It's an absolute practice. So revisit conversations, update the agreements, check in on how the team is doing against the norms that they agreed upon. That's how you build the kind of trust that holds up under pressure. Not because everything's perfect, but because people know each other well enough to choose each other anyway. Let's wrap this up. The military doesn't build that kind of cohesion by accident. They build it because they have to, because the cost of not having it is too high. I believe that corporate teams are starting to understand that the cost is too high for them too, even if the stakes look different. Disengagement costs, turnover costs, broken trust costs. Teams that feel like strangers are leaving real performance and real potential on the table every single day. You don't need a drill sergeant. You need intention, consistency, and the willingness to be known by the people that you lead alongside. That's it. That's what's been on my mind this week. These are the conversations I'm privileged to hold in the room with real teams, and I hope this gave you something you can actually use, whether you're a leader, a team member, an HR professional, or anywhere else. If you want to go deeper on any of this, especially the MBTI and TKI work, I run team effectiveness workshops built specifically for this kind of transformation. There's a link in the show notes that has everything you need to reach out, and let's talk about what your team actually needs. And until next time, please be kind to your mind. That's it for today's episode of Embrace Your Inner Boldness. If this stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Screenshot this episode, tag me at Becoming Bold LLC, and share it with someone else who's ready to rise. And hey, if you haven't already, take a second to subscribe, rate, and review the show. That's how we spread the boldness and keep this movement growing. Whatever came up for you today, feel the fear and do it anyway. You don't need to wait for perfect timing or permission. You are powerful. You are ready. And remember, the only limit to your boldness is the one you set for yourself. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep becoming you.